You want to be actually making sure that you're not doing an audit for the sake of doing an audit, but you actually have time and the ability to fix things, to implement the improvements that you identify needing to be made. Hey there, you're listening to Content About Content. It's a podcast designed to help you feel more confident, content, and in charge of your content creation and content management activities. I'm your host, Jen Robson. I'm the founding director of Engage Agency. It's a content agency based here in New South Wales in Australia. We are a content agency, or one of them, used by some of the brands you know, love and trust, like Adobe, like PayPal. And if you're in Southeast Asia or have been there recently, you'll have heard of our other major one, which is Grab. We also work with other small companies from time to time, big and small, agencies as well. And all we do is content. And so today we're heading into episode 3 and we're talking about content audits. So let's dive in, shall we? So when you're running a content audit, you're really looking at 3 kinds of audits to run. If you are looking at more of a pure content audit, what people normally think about when they talk about content audits, or sometimes they'll call it a website audit, is an SEO-based content audit. It's to identify your places where you can improve organic findability through Google, through Bing, through all of the other, I think it's Baidu that they use in China. Through all of those search engines, you're looking at ways to improve your rankings and your findability organically. There are 2 different kinds of SEO audits. There is the content audit, which is more often than not looking more at on-page SEO. We do look at some back-end pieces as well, but really we're looking there still at the content side of things. If you hire, though, a website developer or an SEO expert, they'll often also be looking at the more technical aspects of your site as well. You might get that from a content person. You won't get that from me. I only really look at your content. So when you're looking at an SEO audit, really you're looking at a few things. You're looking at pages that don't currently rank very well, but have the potential to. Ideally, you want them to rank in the top 3 results on Google. That should be your goal of all time. First ranking, sure, absolutely. That's ideal. It's almost impossible, but that's ideal. It does depend on your keywords, obviously, and your niche. But top 3 rankings are where you really want to be. They're the ones that get the most click for that search term. But the real goal is to get on that first page as a first start. And that can be really hard. That's the top 10 results. If you aren't in the top 10 results and people need to click to look at page 2, page 3 to find you, you're really not going to get traffic or any worthwhile traffic for that search term. So that's what you're looking at improving with your SEO-based content audit. So the other thing that you're looking at doing there is fixing problems across the site that's just going to make Google happier. Things like identifying images that don't have alt text, for instance. And you'll also be wanting to look at optimizing your navigation and your internal links. With a developer or SEO person looking at your website audit there for SEO, they're probably also going to be looking at things like your CSS. They'll be looking at your page loading speeds. You know, that might come in a little bit with a content audit. We might be looking at the size of your images, but we're probably not going to be as focused on the page load because that's just not our area of expertise. We can't fix that for you as much as we might want to, but we can tell you there's a problem. There are other kinds of audits that you can run as well. You can run an audit identifying ways to increase engagement across your site. And that's where you're really looking at, what are people engaging with at the moment on your site? What are they not engaging with? What are they commenting on? What are they sharing? That's where you're really honing in on what your audience is interested in and looking at what makes them hit that share button and what makes them mention you in social. The other audit you can run is focused on conversion. So identifying which pages give customers a reason to buy, or if you've got a free trial or free sign up, what gives them a reason to try you out, to sign up or register. It's finding out what content types are generating the most leads and the most effective leads. And it's also defining the most efficient types of content for each stage of the buyer's journey. So what kinds of content? Are they blog posts, videos, infographics? What are they? That is really helping people at each stage, from awareness to consideration, conversion, retention. What are they resonating with at those stages, and thinking what's helping them get to the next place, next stage of the funnel? That's what you're looking at for those kinds of audits. But with all projects, with an audit, you do want to be thinking about the kind of metrics before you get started that you want to be tracking. Before we get into that though, you might want to think about why you run an audit. Seems pretty obvious, improve findability, improve engagement, improve conversion. They're very obvious reasons, but audits take a lot of time. The bigger your business, the longer it takes. For a small business, say a website of, 10, 15 pages, I've run audits on those that have taken upwards of 8 to 10 hours, and that's a small audit. For larger audits, larger businesses, larger websites, you can be looking at months of work for an audit. It all depends. So a lot of it is sitting there and working out, what is your purpose here? Is this going to be worthwhile to you? Because the investment that you're putting in, it's big. So really, it's about digging in and finding out what's working. It's about that research and working out, should you do this? How often should you do this? Generally, I do recommend an audit at least once a year. Probably not more than that. Once a year is a good time to do it. Once every 2 years, if you don't make a lot of changes to your site, if you don't update on a regular basis, especially if you don't have a lot of people adding to it. If you have a lot of contributors on your site, then you want to be doing an audit more often, because you want to be aware of what they're adding and what's changing on your website and what's working across those things that, you may not otherwise see. But for the smaller sites, it's really once a year, once every 2 years is a good kind of time frame to be doing your audits. And part of that is allowing you to identify areas that need refreshing. Some of it is also a good time to prepare for a website rebrand or a website refresh and redesign, keeping in mind that in an ideal world, you would be rewriting your entire website every single year. We don't live in an ideal world. No one does. But, that would be ideal. For those kind of projects, an audit is a great place to start. But also, if you've got a smaller business, then you might not need an audit. Instead, you could be, look, let's be honest, no one is. I'm going to say this word. You're just going to be like, no, that doesn't exist. You could be organized. You could be having this complete control over your website and know every single word that's on there, every single page, every single thing that happens with all of it. That person doesn't exist. No one knows that. Just no one, unless you somehow have this business out there. I will be surprised if this business exists that has a small site, I'm talking less than 15 pages, and one person only looking at that site. That person may know and be in charge and organized of everything on their site. That person doesn't exist. No one has full control over their website and knows exactly what's going on at all stages. We can try. I do have a content plan that I call it a content plan. Really, it's a content management plan that keeps track of all of the assets and all of the major pieces on my site. I use that as well for some clients. I'm getting prepared. I'm just updating it now so that we can share that out on our website for anyone who's interested in trying to be a bit more proactive with their content development. But, even that doesn't go as far enough as you would like. So really, you do still need to be doing that, once a year, once every 2 years, content audit, to have a look at what's working, what's not, what can be fixed, what needs to be got rid of, what can be revised, what can be refreshed. So there's a whole bunch of metrics that you can be looking at to help you to determine that. But there's also some more subjective pieces as well. And all you need to do before you get started in any content audit is sit down and work out, why are you doing this? What are you looking for? What are you going to measure? What are you going to be looking at? And then what are your next steps going to be? And a lot of those final next steps you won't know until the end. But you want to be actually making sure that you're not doing an audit for the sake of doing an audit, but you actually have time and the ability to fix things, to implement the improvements that you identify needing to be made. So as you do that, once you've got all of that on paper, once you've got buy-in, if you need it, from bosses, from managers, from business owners, clients, once you've got all of that, that's when you can start and you can define what it is that you're going to be looking at. So when you are looking at your audit, the most important place to start, well, I guess continue because you've already done that work first of what are you doing. The next place to go is get a really big picture of what's on your site. And I'm only talking about your website at the moment. I'm sure there are similar tools for social. I haven't actually audited anyone's social at this stage. Probably come back to you in about 6 months and go, so this is how you do it for social. No, I haven't done that yet, but I do a lot of website audits, and my favorite tool to get started with any website audit is a tool called Screaming Frog. I've been using Screaming Frog for about 15 years now, I think. Might be longer, I'm not even sure. I love Screaming Frog. Screaming Frog is I guess they call it a freemium tool these days. There's a free part of it, and then, there's a premium part that you pay for as well. I probably shouldn't say this, but I've never paid for them. I've always used the free parts, and it's enough for me. I think they've got a limit of 500 URLs or 500 pages on a website. And that's not really been a problem, even for my big clients, because I can then look at subdomains or specific folders of their site rather than the site as a whole to get exactly the information I need. But there are other tools that can do a lot of the auditing pieces for you automatically. And tools like SEMrush, I still call them SEMrush, although apparently you're not meant to. SEMrush is one of them. They're super expensive, but they're, great for SEO specialists. You've got the cheaper tools like Ubersuggest, which is still that kind of SEMrush piece, but much more simplified, not as much detail, not as much to dig into, but still worth it. That's also a freemium tool where you get some access, but you got to pay to get a bit more. Last time I looked, might have changed. There was a lifetime fee though, which made it much more affordable than a monthly fee. But Screaming Frog gets rid of all of that. I really use it for one part of the tool, and it's with the basic crawl. I type in the URL that I want it to look at, and it does a crawl. It looks at all of the pages from that URL. So if you put in the home page, all the pages of your website, and it will generate a list, which you can then export to CSV, convert into a Excel table or Google Sheets if you use it. And from there, you can see every single page that you have on your website, so long as it's under 500 pages, more if you pay. So on that list that you're generating, you get the basic information there. The Screaming Frog tells you the URL. It tells you if there's a redirect and what kind of redirect is on there, if it's temporary, permanent. It tells you if there is any headlines missing, what your H1 headline is, what your H2 headline is. Just for reference, you need one H1 headline on every page. Please go check and make sure you've got one H1. H2s, no one really cares as much anymore, but they're still there. They're still important, the secondary headlines. But you must have the H1 headline. It tells you what that is. I think it will tell you up to 2 of them and 2 of your H2s, which is really pretty cool. It will tell you how many words on the page and also your image to word count ratio, which I think is pretty cool. It tells you what your meta description and your meta title is. That's the stuff that you're telling Google the page is about, and the name that appears in the top of the browser window above the URL on the tab. And it tells you a lot of other details as well about the pages, that things like load time, I think, is there, but the size of images or size of page is there as well, which is quite useful. But the main outcome that you have of there is every single page on your website in a list. And you might not even know some of those pages existed. Often I will have a smaller business come ask for an audit, and they've installed a theme, like they're using WordPress, they've installed a WordPress theme, and all of these pages pop up that are the standard or the default theme pages that are actually live on their site. It doesn't really damage, it doesn't really, it's not going to rank because everyone has these pages. Like they have a default blog page that says, "Hello world." I don't know if you remember that, but whenever you started up a WordPress site, even if you do it today, you get the original page that just says, "Hello world." So they'll still have that page. They'll have an example blog post page. They'll have an example case study page or a portfolio page or whatever their theme comes with. And that will be live, and they've just not realized. There's no real pain to having that. Google doesn't really care. It's just going to ignore it because it's reused content. It knows it's not content relevant to you at all. But there's no benefit to it either. And what you really want to do is get rid of those so that you can free up space on your site. And when you run these audits in future, you're really much more focused on what is actually should be on your site. So things are just cleaner. Clean is always better than messy, in my world anyway. So that's the kind of thing that you want to be clearing out. And they're really quick, easy fixes. Go into WordPress, turn them off, delete them. The other stuff that does come up in those is a lot of pages that, from a content perspective, you want to be ignoring. They're pages that do exist and need to be there, but the average website visitor can't actually see them. They are your, CSS pages or something. They're more code-based. They're the stuff that makes sure your website runs and that the theme runs on it properly. Those things, I just generally delete those rows. I leave them on the site. Don't pay attention to them. Just ignore them. So that when I end up with this final list, I've got this list of only the information that I want, of only the publicly facing pages that people are looking at and that Google's looking at or not looking at. It does tell me if they're indexed or not, if they've asked Google to ignore it or not. And then I can start from there, from this baseline of it could be 5 pages, it could be 500 pages. Done both. It depends on the size of your site. But at least you have this baseline where you know exactly what is there. And that's where you kick off your audit and you start looking at, so what do you have to start with? Where are you missing things? Do all of your images have alt text? Do all of your pages have meta titles and meta descriptions? Do you have at least 300 words on every page? These things are important. And then you can cross-reference with other tools like the SEMrushers or the Ubersuggests or plugins like Keyword Finder and start looking at, what keywords should those pages be ranking for? What keywords can you look at for improving those pages and the findability of them? Then you can be looking at Google Analytics and thinking about, how do people use these pages? How do people come back to these pages? Do people even look at it? Where do they get to it from? And do they stay on it or do they run off somewhere else in horror? And then once you've done all of that, I like to do 2 more things with my audits. So the first part is to do a more subjective review of all of the content in the site. So I will manually go through every single page in that list and look at, is the content on brand? Is the invoice? Is the content, does it make sense? Is it quality? Is it well written? Is it up to date? Is it out of date? Is it wrong? How recently was it updated? Is it quite old? Does it need a bit of a refresh and, tell Google it's new? I'll be looking at, is it a replication of something else? Is it a stop blank that someone's thrown in just to try and fill a gap that they identified, but it's not able to be got to from anywhere else? Is it linking to the right things? Is it talking about the right things? And is it using the right designs and pieces like that? So that's where you want to be looking at the real subjective pieces of it, I guess. Not all of it is subjective, but you want to be really diving into the content on the pages. And that's where it gets to be a really, really big affair, this content audit piece. And that process, I really dig down and categorize each page in 4 ways. I either categorize it as a revise. So it might be, I need to revise some meta information. Maybe it's missing some meta titles, which are really important, or there's no H1. Maybe it has a certain block that's out of date and needs updating. I categorize them as refresh. It's the 4 R's, this one. So refresh is like, we really need to rebuild this page, rewrite it, restart it, redo it. That could be because it's out of date, it's wrong. It could be because it's in the old voice. It could be because it's super old. It could be that, you need to consider it alongside another page and maybe merge them together or separate a page into 2. Next category is my favorite. It's remove. It's where you get rid of all the old pages, there is no benefit to having this page. No one wants to read this. No one's getting any benefit. Google doesn't even like it. Why does this page exist? It's remove. With that remove, there could be redirects in that as well, because if Google does like a page, you don't want to lose that. I call it SEO juice, the good juice. So you want to do a nice little redirect and tell Google, no, you're looking at this page instead. It's still the same. It's still just as good, but this is newer or this is more relevant. And then the last category is a bit boring. It's retain. It's keep it as it is. It's working well. It's doing its thing. You don't need to do anything with it. I guess that's everyone else's favorite thing. That's the good category there. But a lot of this also through the audit, you will find, maybe you need to revamp the navigation to make it work better. So you might not have that many retained pages, or if they are retained, they may have minor changes that need to be made. So yeah, that's basically what a content audit is. You can add things to it. I often like to throw in a competitor review at the same time to really have a look at either, across the industry, what are people doing well? What are people doing that are different? For direct competitors, what are they ranking for? What keywords are they looking at that we should be ranking for? For competitors, who's linking to them and why? And do we want them to link to us instead or as well? Backlinkings, I don't do backlinks. That's a whole specialty in itself, chasing a backlink, and I can't be bothered. But SEO specialists do that a lot. So, but it's still useful information to have. If your competitor is really focusing their SEO game on links, then, you need to really think about, are you going to look at that? Are you going to update that? Focus on getting more links to your site, perhaps getting similar links or better links as well. And yeah, so you can kind of understand at the end of that why an audit can take so very, very long. And it all depends on how much detail you want and what your objective is. So I do recommend doing it once a year, and a lot of the time it's working it out as you go. Finding out, you end up worming into all these different holes that you didn't even know were there. And it can be super interesting. When you get to the SEO part, the keyword part, I like to ask others to pick that one up because I can do it. Last time I did it, I ended up in a wormhole of, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. 20 hours later, back to my original point. Yeah, so, you need to be really focused in this stuff to make sure that you get it where you need to be and you're not wasting forever pulling out information. But when you do a complete audit, then you have a roadmap that you can prioritize as well. What's quick to fix, what's going to take a lot more time, what's cheap to fix, what's going to cost a lot, and what's the priority of that fix, what impact is that fix going to make. And it's just a way to get really quick wins on your site with quite a bit of work to start with. But it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile doing at least every 2 years, ideally every year, just to keep your site running smoothly. Think of it as a checkup at your GP. It's just only with your website instead. So that's everything content audits, and I feel like I probably talked your ear off enough for this week, so I will leave it there. If you found this episode useful at all, I'd love for it if you were to subscribe, write a review. Might be a bit early for that, but write a review. I'd love it. Share it with your friends. Send it to someone who may be interested or may get some benefit from this. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I look forward to speaking to you next week. Bye.